Hi, what I've got for you today is a Strauss solid-state AM/FM AFC/AC/DC radio. If you like these kinds of things, I'm going to try to repair this. We'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. I post every week or two something new. This I got because I had an attempted repair of a Walkman fail. A trace lifted and it got irritating and I gave up. It was a bottom-of-the-line Sony. There was a lot wrong with it, so it's become a parts machine. But I picked this up. I overpaid a little bit for it. It's got some glitter on it, which tells you it was down in someone's basement with the Christmas ornaments. And I'll flip this over. We'll put some batteries in it and give it a try. Okay, so here's the back. Again, Canadian. We've got only English, made in Hong Kong. I don't think you can see that. We've got a schematic, which is really, really, really small, but should tell us where all the bad capacitors are in here. No date. I'm actually kind of, wow, that's tight. Okay, so let's flip it over and see if we've got any life. Absolutely nothing with batteries. I don't hear anything. This is the power here. Nothing. Well, I gave up on the batteries. Maybe just that the battery compartment is so tight because of perhaps the plastic's aged that it's not making good connection. Okay, now I've got it plugged in as opposed to connected to batteries. AM works fine. FM. So, there's some FM, but not much there. I'm assuming this is early 70s, but it could be later than that. I'm not sure. I think it's a kind of sort of generic made in Hong Kong radio. So there's that, and there's trying to figure out what's wrong with the battery pack. And that might just be the plastic just having shrunk and being so tight around the batteries that they're not making good contact. So I'm going to unplug this, flip it over, and let's have a look inside. Okay, so it's now unplugged. Cord sitting on the floor. As I mentioned before, we've got a model number PQ29, 2 watts, 6 volts DC. We've got, I'll try to zoom in on this a little bit. We've got a schematic here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 transistors. Yeah, so I think that the problem here is probably just this very, I'll zoom back out. It's probably just this very, very tight plastic interfering with the batteries making contact, but we can look into that after. So let's get these screws out. Looks like there are 2 here. I'll zoom out. Nice, that's all the way. Get these 2 out here. And let's have a look inside. I also see some loose wires here. Those could be going to the battery. We have a Canadian certification sticker on it. That's always nice. Do we have another? Okay, there we go. So yeah, so those 2 wires go to the battery compartment, and we have a fairly typical, I think, Hong Kong radio, a little tiny speaker. I mean, it's really just a small portable radio in a big case. We've got an enclosed transformer coming out here. All the transformers are, the transistors are in fairly modern looking packages. I mean, my guess is if there's anything that can be fixed in here, it's probably the capacitors. They're the diodes. I don't know if you can see. Let me find a flashlight here. Down in there you can see 1, 2 diodes. Down over there. Look at the transistors and transformers. I mean, this antenna goes in at a bit of an angle. It's a bit cheesy. Yeah, so none of the capacitors look obviously bulged or anything, so it's odd that they've got the antenna comes along here and then it's just, I mean, I guess it probably wasn't dangling when that masking tape was still alive, but then there's kind of like a wire that comes out and it's soldered on to the antenna. That's weird. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrolytics. Trojan branded. That's pretty funny, I think. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 transistors. Okay. So we got all of those. I mean, it's funny, like most of these resistors look, totally contemporary, then you get the older style. So, yeah. So I think I'm going to try to get this board out and let's have a look and see if we can hold up any other capacitors and that sort of technique to try to figure out what's going on. I'm not thrilled with the prospect of working on this with the line cord plugged in. I mean, how good's the isolation? But it's got a, it's got a CSA listing, so at least the transformer must meet some sort of standard. We'll see. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 screws to get it out. I think I'm going to work on that and then we'll come back. Okay, I've got all the screws out and the antenna removed, but it looks like I'm going to have to get the transformer off in order to have any chance of getting this board out. It's hooked up on something here and I can't see it. The dial comes out, it doesn't have a proper dial, I suppose, so that's not probably what the issue is. So I will try to get this transformer out. I was hoping not to have to do that. Okay, here we have it apart. There's a speaker labeled Pioneer. This is the battery box that we saw before. Here's the transformer. That's coming over. I'll close this up and push this out of the way a little bit. So here's the board we were looking at before. There's the transformer and power supply. January 1972. 22nd of January 1972. So that's essentially the copyright date on that capacitor. Might be a little bulged, but I mean the chances of these being, so we've got 1, 2, 3 500 microfarad capacitors. That's a bit poor. I mean, so they dump wax on it to try to hold that in place. There's little ones here. These are 5 microfarad, probably both of them. 5 microfarad, 10 volts. This is the band switch, AM, FM. The board's reasonably well labeled. You know, with the schematic, it's actually not too bad. I mean, this is just the assembly quality is a bit slapdash, but so I got a 9 transistor AM FM set. These have to, there are 2 diodes in here. These have to be on the power supply because we've got pins coming there. This is still this weirdo attachment of the antenna. It really does, I mean, this board is cut out, so it is designed to fit into this case, but why wouldn't you just solder it directly? Why would you use this big fat green wire here? Anyway. And the dial is really quite cheesy. It's just a sticker with 2 colors on it. It's a bit loose and just stuck on. That's it. A couple of lines there to show if I was installing it where it's supposed to go. Let's take that off if we can. Make it a bit easier to get at things. And it ruined, spoiling our lovely dial. Okay, so now we can see the back. Power, volume. Have to be very careful of these tracks, given that I just lifted one on a Sony. Feeling a bit tense about that. I mean, what's with that? They didn't even cut off that leg. Oh. Look at that. Not very good assembly quality here. Look at that, there's another one. Let's find a 500 microfarad capacitor and go from there. Okay, so I just want to point out, so this is the capacitor which I tested by putting another one across it, and it got a lot louder when this was bridged. This one, as you can see, is part of the output, speaker output filtering. So you can see on the board they've got marked the speaker crosshair. And this wire does look like it's taking the speaker up there. So let's do that one. And see where that takes us. With a combination of soldering braid and my cheapo solder sucker, I've managed to get this off. I've marked the negative over here, so let's push the component in a bit hard because this awful find something to wipe that off with. This awful wax or glue or whatever they put on this stuff is all over the place. But yeah, so we had negative on that side. So let's see if we can get this through the goop and then hope we've got enough flux to clear out whatever remains. Actually, I'm going to put some extra flux on that. So just put a big gob on with the just put the wrong capacitor in too. That's a 4. We want the 2. Alright, there we go. See, I put one that was about the same size, physically size on there, but of course they've gotten smaller. Alright, so let's solder this on and then we'll try it out. I have a whole bunch of these tubes of solder that come free when you order stuff. I have some better stuff, but I find them convenient. I do generally stay away from lead solder because I've got a small kit around, and I'm not sure my cleanup is good enough for that. Okay, so let's plug this in and see how we're doing. My guess is that it's going to solve a whole lot of trouble, and then we'll see from there. Okay. It's louder, for sure. Definitely improved. So we've had some incremental improvement. We also have our FM antenna is this. So I think the next step is going to be to try out some of the other capacitors in the power chain. It looks like the big power supply kind of electric are all right. So let's look at some of these over here. Well, let's look at this one because it's right in front of us. This is, that's the one I just replaced. This one says 10 microfarads. So that one is 30 microfarads, 10 volts. Sorry. Is that right? Yeah, 30 microfarads. Oh, and this is a 10. So I thought I had the 30s. 10s. Okay. Well, let's see what we've got here. Those are 22. That would probably work, but let's see. I've got to have 30s in here somewhere. 33. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So from what I understand, and in my limited experience, you can usually go up a little bit with these sorts of things without too much trouble. But not down is not so good. All right, is this positive? Yeah, that's positive. But of course, modern capacitors mark the negative. So we got to do it the other way around. All right, so let me figure out what terminals are for that, and we'll try pushing one in play. Okay, so what I've tried to do is clear out those pads a little bit. Now I'll just try to wiggle it out. That one's coming out easily. That one too. If you remember on that little pocket radio, I had trouble with these pads lifting on these Hong Kong, because the circuit boards aren't very good. There we go. I think it's actually clear. I think I can get them through without having to mess around with it anymore. So what we'll do is we'll take this, and I marked negative over there. So see if we can get this through here. Let me turn that so you can see. Oh, now I've lost track of which side's supposed to be negative. That side, I believe. Okay, so we still have a little bit too much solder in the holes there. So what I'll do is I'll get some solder wick and see if we can clear these out a little bit more. That looks a little better. And what I'm concerned about is getting too much heat on these tracks. I don't want to lift them. I've already been there today. There we go. So those look good. So now we'll go back. If you'll see, I put a small black dot over there to mark the negative side. And there we go. So that's it in place. Got the soldering iron, a little bit of solder again. Just a little more than that. And then we just clip off the leads, right? And see how we did. So, and there's the new capacitor in there. Not very straight, mind you, but it's not like anything on this board was before. So I'll plug it in, we'll see if that made any difference, and then we'll move on. What I'm going to do is this one here, you see I've marked it as negative on that side. These are 5 microfarad on there. These are, I don't know if you can see that, but these are 4.7s, which is the closest thing I have, and the likely modern component replacement, I suppose. So I'll just solder suck those out as much as I can, and then remove the component as I did before, and then use solder wick to get up get the hole cleared so I can solder another one in. So I'm going to do those two, and then I will come back. So there we go, those have all been replaced. And we seems to be doing all right. So I'll just slide it over so you can see what I replaced. I zoom down a little bit. So I've replaced this one, and these two, and this one, and that one. So that all seems to have helped a fair bit. Well, it's funny. I don't know what that is. It's like there's one transistor in a different package there. Is that 3? Can't tell. Anyway, so then there are 2. Oh, that might be associated with the power supply here, because this is, I think, the power supply. So the question is whether to replace the 500 microfarad ones, and I think I'm probably going to, because I've got them right here. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll replace those as well. And then we'll have all the capacitors changed in it, and see how we're doing. This is never going to be a great radio, but it's fun to get it working again. Okay, there's one of the, what I think are the power supply capacitors changed. Actually, that seems to make a difference too. Maybe. I don't know. Okay, so we'll do the last two and see how that goes. Okay, so let me zoom in to show you the problem I've now got with this second capacitor. So this one here, this one I replaced, no problem. With this one here, right, this pin here is out, no problem. But this one here is in this big mess of solder mess. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off. And because everything's going in here, I'll just figure out some way of getting the positive side down there. I guess it's not the ground, it's the positive. But anyway, so there's the power point where everything is going together right there. So we'll see what I can squeeze in there in terms of tools and try to get that off. It's not going to be fun. I think probably I will wreck a blade here. Yeah, I think that's going to be the only choice. All right, well, back to this. So I think I have a solution to this problem. Just make sure I got that right. Yeah. So what I've done is I scored the positive lead from this with a knife and wiggled it a couple of times and it broke right off. So that worked fine. And, well, this is the one that broke off, so you can see where it broke off right there. I've got the negative out here through its initial hole. And here I've run this, there's a large hole that has the tab from the volume control that comes in here and has all these positive pile of solder comes together right there. And I will attempt to solder that on top of that lot. We'll just put a big blob of flux on it to help that cause out. I don't have nearly a large enough tip on the soldering iron at the moment to hope to do that. So we might get the old instant heat gun out and give that a go for that. But I think I made the correct choice in not attempting to desolder. So we'll just do this here. Okay, well, let's see. We'll give this iron a try. You can see all the flux I put on there. Well, that's the shoddiest of joints. So let me get another iron and we'll try that. We're going to give the old instant heat gun a go here. Certainly not instant, but oops, I can't reach the soldering sponge. Well, we'll just see what we can do with this. Still looking pretty dry to me. All right, this is not the best instant heat gun. This is a cheapie I bought to do some car stuff once. Claims to be 100 watts. Okay, some of that's not totally dry. All right, so let's cut those leads off and see what we've got.
Like so many other folks, Diane
So all the capacitors have been replaced now, all the electrolytics, not the ceramics.
No concerts, no piano. He couldn't play, and his future depended on this. It was a critical time, a key moment in his career.
So it seems to be working.
Was able to provide him with an electric piano for his apartment, but it turned out that piano couldn't handle the types of showpieces that had.
So not bad, right? And so we do seem to have working FM. Let's go back to AM for a second.
Not telling the truth. You're a pool of antlers to show up for this thing, just like the Super Bowl? Absolutely, and what the books are doing is...
And that seems to be working. AM seems nice and strong too. It's not a great FM radio. Some of, I think, the trouble that I'm getting is that the ASC likes to cut out. I think I've ranted about before when I looked at the GE radio of not really liking the way automatic frequency control is implemented in most of these things. All right, so I'm going to try the battery box and see if I can figure out what the issue is there. And then we'll come back. I might test some of these capacitors, and after I've got it back together, and we'll see what we've got. I have figured out what's wrong with the battery pack. It's simple, but maybe harder to repair than I think. So there are batteries on there, and I checked no voltage out of the battery pack. And I thought I'd check the voltage across the batteries directly. And I took a meter probe. So the problem is contact between this battery and the battery box. So these plastic pieces here effectively stop the battery from pushing forward anymore. And what happens is the plastic, I think, has flexed out a little bit over time, so this is not out enough. So I'm going to just stuff something in there to try to push the metal battery contact forward towards the battery a bit more. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to use for that. Here, why don't we start with something dumb like this little piece of solder braid. I'll just stuff that down in there, see what that does. Actually, I think that might work. Okay, so, okay. Yeah. And there we go. I did try checking some of these components with a little component tester. I'll just show you one of these for the moment. So this is one of the big 500 microfarad electrolytics. And, you know, that's not too bad. It doesn't look bad, just to compare it with the ones I replaced it with. So, modern no-name replacement. That's running, it's showing a little low actually. It didn't when I tested it before, but you know, it's fine. That one's fine too. So 150, 23% V-loss, ESR 18 ohms. This one's pretty dead, right? Pretty dried out. And that's supposed to be 200 micro. Then we have a couple of these 5s. We'll try one of those. The smaller ones are bad, but I actually think that these larger ones were probably okay. Probably didn't need to be taken out. But once you start doing them, there's a fairly high temptation to do the whole thing. So as I was looking at the video for this radio, I realized that I missed a capacitor. And that's no good. So let's have a look. Let's find the missed one. And then I guess I get to take this apart and see. So the missed electrolytic is this one, this gray one right here. So, yeah, we'll take it back apart, replace that one, and then give it one final test. and that is a 50 microfarad capacitor. And there's another one that I didn't see before, hiding over here. And this one here. So I'll have to replace both of those as well. Let's concentrate on this one right now. And same deal as before, but I just want to see, this one has the negative labeled. I don't know. We'll zoom in here. Let's see. Maybe that's visible. So that says negative, not positive. 10 volts, 50 micro. So we'll do one and the other, and then I'll come back and we'll reassemble the radio and do a final test. So that's this one in here. So the issue is just going to be this one. And I just poured. I don't think I'm going to be able to read this till I get it out. But that's also labeled negative. And I'm guessing that goes. I'm just trying to see where it comes through here. Maybe there and there. This is going to be the transformer in here. There and there. That would be my guess. Yeah, that's the tabs from the transformer. So it's got to be those two because there's a resistor right by it. Two resistors that come off. One up here, one maybe across there. That's going to be those two negatives labeled that side, so that means this one here will be the negative one. So we'll put, the negative side of the capacitor. So we'll put I don't know if any of this is, so I'll put a black dot there to try to mark that. And yeah, so that's just to give you some idea of how I'm trying to do it by flipping back and forth and just doing it spatially to try to figure out what's what. Haven't gotten one wrong on this board yet, but you know, there's always a first time. Okay, so now I've got the radio back together with the last capacitors that I missed before replaced. They seem to have improved the FM performance a bit, and let me just show you that. So there we go. Hums probably because of the electronics here.
With some bright pastoral music with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra after that.
So it's certainly not a great radio, but it's working much better than it was before.
Toronto's esteemed Don Alfonso 1890 restaurant has been named the #1 Italian restaurant in the world.
AM's actually pretty good.
Top Italy.
Hi, I'm Nick DiDonato, president of Liberty.
So it's actually pretty decent AM radio. So I'm afraid I had to go back to this one to get these two missed capacitors right here that I somehow overlooked when I replaced them the first time. It is, and that does seem to have, these must have been associated with the FM band because replacing them does seem to have made a significant difference there. Unfortunately, I threw the other capacitors out, so I don't really have them easily to hand to show you all, but there are at least 3 different types of capacitors in it, which is interesting in terms of brands. These ones are Truth. Well, there you go. Truth brand. I haven't tested these ones. I suspect they're probably bad because there was a change, certainly in the FM. So I actually think this is quite a cute little radio. I like the 60s looks. Even though it's 1972, it does have that real sort of mid to late 60s look. I guess this squared off thing looks a little 70s, but I will have to find a knob for it. I have found some pictures of this radio online. It's just sort of a plain brown knob kind of deal it looks on it, so presumably anything will do. We've lost our big surplus store in Toronto many years ago called Active Surplus, which was wonderful. There are other surplus stores, but there's nothing that's quite as convenient for those of us who live downtown-ish anyway, to go root around as Active Surplus was. That's a shame. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video on this little radio. As I've said before, I try to post these things every week or two, depending on how much time I have and what I've managed to got to mess around with. That's just only a hobby after all. And as you can see with the missed capacitors, this is purely an amateur activity. So if you follow along with me, you get to learn as I try to figure out what's going on with this. And what's clear here is that one can easily think one's got everything because, hey, I got them all, but not be looking suitably carefully at the board and miss a couple of electrolytics. Well, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll have another one up in about a week.